So what I want you to do is make a conscious effort to save what you might not normally save to help your narrative. So, for example, one of the things that a lot of families do, well, I'll use my family as an example. My mother used to make pizza every weekend from scratch. She would pound the dough, watch it rise for 4 hours, pound it down again, make fresh sauce out of tomatoes from our garden, and it was a very significant part of my childhood that my mother made fresh pizza. It's not something we've recorded anywhere, it's just a memory I have in my head. It's a very kind of mundane memory, but special to me. So how could I get this memory out so that my daughter knows that Grandma made fresh pizza? I could write about it in my diary. I could sit down and just write a list of things that happened every day in my house when I was a kid. And because I know that this story didn't necessarily get passed down, I can make sure that things like making pancakes on Sundays in my own house get passed down by grabbing that camera and taking a picture of my daughter at the stove stirring up the pancake mix. So you have to think in terms of birthday parties, but you also have to think of things that happen every day that tell a little bit about your family. How is that getting recorded and becoming part of your narrative? Remember that your story is important to you and to loved ones, and even to a larger community. You are a representative of your community, so your story. And I get very strange looks sometimes. Why would anybody be interested in my story? Who cares about me? Well, what you're going through now tells a lot about 21st century, how people lived, tells about your town, how it's different from, maybe New Hampshire is different from living in Florida, for example. So your story is important, and your materials are important for the future, for people who are trying to figure out what we went through at this time, in this place. Just be aware that just because it says archival or preservation safe doesn't mean it's safe. Make sure you're ordering from a reputable supplier. So I'm going to go right to a second example from my personal collection. And this includes unique items. Remember in the beginning I talked about those unique items, but I also talked about other things you might find in your collections that aren't unique. My mother, this folder is correspondence from my mother from when I was in college. So before I got to college, my mom used to keep comic strips right next to the refrigerator, things that struck her fancy, and when I was in college she would send me some of these. So you'll notice this is not the original news clipping. She did send me the original news clipping. What I did was photocopy it because newsprint will not last. I'm sure you all have yellowing news clippings. There's nothing inherently valuable usually about the newspaper itself, especially if you're dealing with just a clipping, so make a copy. Regular paper like you get at Staples is just fine for this purpose. Also in this file I have legal size letters from my mother that she wrote to me. Now here's where we go to the ideal versus what we can do. Ideally, I will unfold these and put them in legal size folders because the folds on the paper tend to weaken over time, and I'm sure you've seen letters that have ripped along the fold. I don't have enough room in my house to have a few papers in legal size folders, and so I keep it folded like this and know that maybe one day it's going to rip along that line, but doing the best I can, that's what suits me now. I also have some cards in here. My mom likes cute things. She knows I love Snoopy. We have some white paper mixed in with the yellow paper. So the white paper and the yellow paper have different compositions, and I'm going to keep my eye to make sure the yellow paper isn't making the white paper turn colors, and if it does, I'll put interleaving paper in between. If it's something that's really acidic or bad, like a news clipping, I'll either photocopy it or put it in a different folder if I want to keep that original for some reason. I won't keep that in the same folder as things on much better paper because those acids are still going to migrate, even with the interleaving paper. That's not necessarily the best thing to do. Any questions about my correspondence folder?
And it's it's helping someone else. I've donated, we've gone to Connecticut and donated numerous items to one museum.
Well, that speaks to the idea that many people say to me, well, why would anybody want this? And I actually had a client who had letters from her aunt that were written in French, and she didn't really want them. She didn't speak French, and she didn't feel a connection to this aunt. And I started explaining there was a Manchester connection. She was an immigrant. I think it was French. But I was saying, well, the Manchester Historical Society might be interested in this, and this is why. And then she started rethinking it and saying, oh, well, maybe I do have these. Maybe they do have value that I wasn't seeing before.